difference. You are definitely dwelling on the right thing. There is a difference, just not enough to change the electorate.
Yeah.
So it was Ohio and Florida that they were comparing, and these are the assumptions that happened. So anyway, I'll stop it. But it's if anybody wants to look it up, this is the article from November 14th. Oh, it's only 7 days ago. Man, we are current.
We're right
All
on
right.
it.
And Tom, just listen to Tom, and you'll have your problem solved.
But it's all fake news. It's so.
Well, no, I resent the fake news kind of moniker blame. It's like calling out people's, with nicknames on the playground. Uh, in Spanish, as you know, we do it a lot, very often. Everybody has a nickname,
Right.
including me. And I went to school. I went to elementary school, mostly in Mexico, and everybody had a nickname. And it is not too insulting. There was Big Nose, it was Fatso, it was Skinny. I fit into that one. They also called me, my grandma called me Mosquita Muerta, the dead, fly. And that's because you call someone that when they're very coy. There must be a word in English when they're really responsible for things, but they do it so coyly that they don't get caught.
Ah.
But we suspect who they are, and so it said it's a fly acting dead, but they're not really dead.
Yeah. Right.
So anyway, that was one of my nicknames from my grandma. But what I was trying to say is, many times the nickname is based on some fact. Uh, I don't know, thick thumbs, big ears. That was one of mine too. But the nickname was based on something physical. It was kind of true, might have been very true. No one really got offended because somebody else, you could always point out somebody's snobby knees or something. There was some kind of defense. But what I'm saying is, those were nasty. People accepted them, even though they hurt. They hurt on me anyway. But they were based on some reality.
Right.
Fake news, when it's just thrown about, I think is very dangerous, because it's not just a hot potato that somebody's holding and now they're it and now they're the fake news. No, there are news that are news, and then there are stuff that's made up. And originally, fake news meant that's the made up stuff.
Right.
Eventually, it was just bandied on anything that they wanted to downgrade.
Yeah. Anything you don't want to hear, it's fake.
Yeah. So that's why I don't like to use the term, even when it's referring to inaccurate or lies. I rather just call them lies, because the fake news parts could bounce back to me, and many people can't tell the difference.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, I got you out of me. Thank you for giving me.
Yeah, I know good people that watch Fox and believe every word, and
Yeah.
Well, it's very odd. It's
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's a strange kind of willingness to overlook a complete contradiction when you say, "Oh, all the news is fake. I trust this. I trust Fox, or I trust OAN or something, or Newsmax or something like that." It's like, well, what makes you think that is any less prone to fakeness than any other news agency? It's only
including
because
the one you're consuming.
it agrees with what you want to think, and that doesn't. That's the only difference that I can see.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm thinking of, that's all she watches. So she's not getting any other perspectives.
Right.
And she's not the most analytical person. But it's driven by fear and outrage. And so I visit her. Do you know, Carolyn, what blah blah blah? You know, I was like, what? Because I don't watch Fox, and I'm
Right.
like, seriously?
Yeah. No, I don't know that actually.
And she's shocked at how much I don't know.
Yeah, it's amazing. You're
Um,
so
You
ignorant.
know, I listen to Right Radio sometimes in the afternoons. Uh, One of the local stations puts on all the national syndicated ones, and sometimes I listen to them just to feel out where they're at. Uh, but one of the ones that always makes me laugh is the media are making you believe this, and like, wait a minute, I am listening to the radio. That is a type of media. You are the media, and you're telling me that the media is telling me something different,
Yeah.
right? No, you are the media. In fact, I would probably say I would have said years ago that it was the right that was on the radio the most, and probably the left, since I listen to NPR and to a bunch of other left-leaning ones. Uh, but what surprises me is not just that label of the media. I had another point to make. I lost it. One was for Carolyn and one was for Mr. Garza.
but you're right. The media has been the whipping boy, well, since Trump was president, or probably even before when he was campaigning.
Yeah, since Clinton for me.
Since Clinton.
I would listen to these things and they would talk about the media this, the media that. So well, anyway, I once they fall, it's like somebody quoting the internet. By the time that somebody gets to that argument, it's time for me to shut off and go back to the other one, because I know they're, it's like I've taught my kids. I loved watching series with you, but the moment that people start sleeping with each other, whether it's in, whatever, whether it's the high school show or whether it's Lost or whatever else, the moment people start sleeping with each other, then the writers run out of ideas, and this is the way to keep interest high. The sex always sells. So I usually, in any episodes that I'm watching, whenever that starts to happen, I listen to my own advice and say, it's not going to get any better.
Yeah.
So rules to live by.
Sure. As good a one as any, I guess.
That's one that they remind me now that, oh, Dad, it's starting. Okay, let's go. Let's watch another.
So what else has anybody seen lately?
Well, I don't remember if this had happened already last week when we did this, but Title 42 is struck down.
Oh, that's right. That happened this week.
Yeah.
But I guess he's giving them a 5-week reprieve. So that it'll be interesting to see what happens then to Biden's Venezuela policy after those 5 weeks.
Well, I read the counter on Right Media for that was that the Biden administration is wholly unprepared for the number of people that are going to come to the border thanks to Section 42 being thrown out. I really should poll my Central American friends more to see what they're getting, what they're gleaning from announcements such as this. Because policy is very slow to trickle down to people unless it has a very nice sensationalist bent.
I read a really good quote. There was a story, this is not brand new, this is several weeks old, from October 23rd, New York Times, El Paso can't do it alone. It was a 2-page spread, but this one guy said, immigration in the United States is broken, but one side of the fence wants to study the root causes of the problem and don't want to see what's happening right here. Mr. Martin, this is John Martin, who's the director of the Opportunity Center for the Homeless in El Paso. So they don't want to see what's happening right here, Mr. Martin said, squinting beneath the brim of his cowboy hat. And the other side wants to build a wall, which would become a dam and eventually burst. I thought that was a pretty good quote. I mean, he's kind of, and then he goes on to say, That's about the most political answer I've ever given. But yeah, the article itself is about how El Paso is handling the mass of people that are coming. This was right as Biden was changing the policy, and talking about the busing that was happening from El Paso, which was very different from the busing that was happening from the governor.
Yeah.
But it was quite a good article.
Did you send that around at the time? Because I seem to remember having
I
read it.
didn't. I just I have stacks of New York Times in my house that I periodically like. Let's pull out the stuff I really want to read and let's recycle the rest of it. And I did that Sunday night, and I read it today. But I can look it up, and I mean it's New York Times, so there's probably going to be a paywall on it. I can find it. Oh, I know. I can find it on ProQuest through the library and send it out that way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I subscribe to the New York Times, so I can read their stuff if I'm.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'll make a note to myself to do that. ProQuest. That's how I get around the paywalls. I just go to ProQuest.
Right. Well, it's an interesting point, and it's really highlights the fact that there's a lot more nuance in reality going on all over the place than the media is letting us see, or that suits media representation, easy media representation.
Right.
And then on top of that, you have politicians and other wannabe influencers who then take the bare facts that the media tends to give you and spin it their own way. So it like really ends up becoming warped as the information sort of spreads around. But if you actually go talk to people who are doing things, there's a lot more subtlety and nuance there.
Yeah, and it's displayed quite a bit, that nuance in this article, which is considered an opinion piece, but it's somebody who's actually talked to people in El Paso and is getting them kind of the what it's really like there and how they're trying their best. I mean, it doesn't talk about their webpage, but this is where that information, this is the information that feeds into that. It's about helping people. It's not about using them as political pawns.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, at the point that this article was written, well, let me just read these two paragraphs. But quietly, without fanfare or grandstanding, political punchline or taunt, the Democratic-leaning, immigrant-rich, majority Latino city of El Paso has been sending daily fleets of buses to New York, Chicago, and at times Miami, transferring asylum seekers over state lines in waves that have dwarfed the trickle of buses dispatched by the governor. At this writing, El Paso has sent more than 280 buses. Mr. Abbott more than 65. El Paso officials I spoke with do not want to be confused or even associated with Mr. Abbott's busing antics, which are broadly regarded here as dehumanizing. The El Paso buses, they say, are a pragmatic, even compassionate initiative from a city that simply doesn't have the manpower or money to otherwise cope with the arrival en masse of asylum seekers. El Paso is one of the poorest major cities in the United States, officials point out, and they are doing the best they can.
And then they produced that dashboard, which we saw a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah.
So I just recovered. You triggered the thought, Carolyn, on media and right-wing media. Because there was also left-wing media that I also have friends that are listening almost exclusively, and they've become just as closed. And I'm thinking of a friend in particular who will not miss Rachel
Maddow.
Um,
Yeah.
because for her, that is the news. It's like I have another friend, doctorate, very intelligent, who swore off regular news outlets and would only pick it up from the Daily Show. That was his news place, right? But in any case, I haven't listened to Rachel frequently enough or for a whole episode, so I don't know how slanted she is. But my friend swears by it and gets a lot of ideas that are irrefutable from her position. Uh, and I think that's also training that is bad. Uh, Even if Rachel may be more correct than Rush Limbaugh, it's still not good to be so closed in. And then I have a contribution when you want to take this conversation to a light mode, because it's funny and it's the beginning. My first time that I ever remember giving a speech on immigration.
Oh, by all means, share this
Can I
with us.
jump into it? So I must have been like a sophomore in college, maybe even younger. Um, and I don't know who hired me or convinced me, but I remember the flyer because I had to put up a title. They invite you to speak and then they want a title. And like, well, you just asked me. I haven't thought of what I'm going to tell you. I mean, I've now been through it many times, but that was like my first time. So I had to come up with a title. And so it was not mimeograph. It wasn't that old, not long ago, but it seemed like it. But anyway, the title of it was "How to Cross the U.S. Border." Was the main title on it, and then with the little tiny type was "illegally,"
Mhm.
and that was the subject of my talk. I've lived along the border all my life, or at that time at least half of my life,
Yeah.
and I have a lot of relatives. And crossing the border, you don't really think illegally. You just think you got to cross the border today, whether
Right.
it's a wedding or whether you got to go to work or whatever else. You're just crossing the border, and the border is an inconvenience. Sometimes it's an expensive one if you get caught, whatever else, or more inconvenience. They'll slow you down 3 or 4 hours by catching you. Anyway, so I gave a talk. I gave that talk because I wanted to share that it wasn't such a big deal. We're talking 80s.
Yeah.
But I had found this movie, and maybe, let me see. Oh, shoot. I can't cover it. All right. Well, you'll see it. Let me share this, just the visuals for now. And I finished that presentation with this video. Yeah. And this is like the last scene of the movie. But my point in levity again was just this happens. Oops. For you guys, do you see black or do you actually see a movie?
Now I see black, but a second ago I saw people coming over a hill.
Exactly. Do you see that now, or did it go away?
Yeah,
No,
I see it.
Okay. So this is the last scene of the premise of the movie is there's an American, but he comes from East LA, so he was born and raised in Spanish.
Yeah.
And so he gets caught by immigration and he gets shipped across the border to live in Mexico, but he doesn't even know how to speak Spanish. It's a Cheech and Chong movie,
Yeah.
if you must know. But it's very funny because, of course, he makes really regular situations that would happen to an illegal immigrant coming into the U.S., but now turning it around and what happens to him illegally when he's shipped to Mexico, because he's an American citizen.
Mm-hmm.
So then he's got to cross back into San Diego, and this is how he crosses with everybody else. This is, well, that was it. That was the scene, but it's out in the desert where there's now a wall, and back then there was no such thing, but they were training people on how to cross and how to overwhelm the border patrol. And as you were talking, that scene went through my head because now I forget even the prompt. Thank you. Sorry.
Your
But
speed.
that was
Your
my
speed.
first excursion.
That's actually a really pithy political commentary. That movie.
Yeah.
It's funny and funny in often a very silly and fairly crude way, but the whole premise of the movie, as you point out, as I recall, I haven't seen it in many years, but it's really a very potent. It makes a bunch of good points and really interesting points.
Yeah. I later enhanced the thinking of this movie with a Princeton professor, uh, Douglas Massey, who's now, no, at the time he was at Penn, and then he moved over to Princeton with the Mexican Migration Project, because one of his arguments, as he's made, when he talks policy, we have 10 minutes.
Hmm.
When he talks policy, he's got all the data in the world.
Mm.
His project from Central America, but he started out with Mexico, is he goes to families that have a person that's migrated, they get their phone number, and then they interview that person who now lives in the States. And so they get both point of views as to how much money they make, where they come from, why did you migrate, and how is it going.
Mm.
So he's got really good data. His research team, I met many of the students and the Mexican professor, whatever else. But anyway, Doug pointed out to me in some discussion that has stayed with me, and that is, he says, there's 100 million Mexicans in Mexico. There is a decent number in the U.S. You could probably add them all together to X. 30 million if you count the ones that are recently arrived, the parents and their kids, whatever else, he says. He says, but there's 100 million Mexicans still in Mexico. Why don't they come if coming to the U.S. seems to be the big deal? Americans are afraid of the Mexicans south of the border. And he says, I've investigated that topic, and then I've come back to the human emotions level. He says, because I'm a sociologist, I look for the trends. I look for what's happening so we can predict where the trend is taking us. And he says, the only time, this was after 94, so it must have been like 98, 99, because 94 was a threshold year for immigration and politics in Mexico, devaluation. And he says, the only times that we can measure a big wave coming up from Mexico is when the economy is bad. When things break down in Mexico is when they move. And then he shows me data about, it used to be that in the US, a Mexican could come and work and he'd earn 20 times what he earned back home. And then over the years, it became 10 times as much. And then eventually, at the time he was talking to me, he says, now a Mexican working in the US will earn about 5 times more. He says, so in a way, it's paying less to come to the US. It's still a lot of money, but but think of what you're sacrificing. You're leaving your family, you're leaving your food, you're leaving your everything. And he says, and those have a price. Mm-hmm. And that price is high enough that most people don't want to do it. 100 million Mexicans have decided not to immigrate.
Yeah.
But if you really want to be afraid, think that through. Because if your argument is that they're all willing to come over and that they can't wait, well, just get yourself in that situation and think of the 100. What are you going to do with 100 million Mexicans? Because the border is really, really big.
Mm-hmm.
And then that triggered them that thought of the movie.
Yeah.
So in 94, I'm still thinking of the 1980 movie that brought everybody across that big hill.
For sure.
So anyway, I had to move. My battery was dying. And we have about 5 minutes left on our call. So
okay. Well, anybody want to wrap up? Do you have any final thoughts here? We've kind of been all over the place.
Well, as a summary, it doesn't seem like anything's going to happen at the national level.
Yeah.
State level, good thing has happened that this governor has continued the funding line for immigration.
Yeah.
And there is a good chance that one thing they passed last year or earlier this year was that there would be an immigrant advisory council to the governor that got approved. And I've heard recently of one person who's being recruited to be on that advisory panel at the state level. So money's still going or is still holding, and some of the things that got approved are coming through. I won't say true because I don't know what good it will do, but so state level. Local level, we haven't had the buses that we were thinking of or expecting. All the agencies are very, very active. Yesterday, well, there was a big piñata party at the Y sponsored by the NAC. The cohort of Hankoval interpreters is going very well. They've really, really put in a lot of hours. But then the sad news came to me a couple of days ago. Garden Hills was distributing coats. And a person that was there told me that it was really sad that they ran out of coats and there was still a lot of people needy. And he says it was really sad because there were little Guatemalans still arriving in T-shirts. That is, they weren't ready for this kind of weather. It might be their first time. So anyway, so not all is well. And locally, we have a lot of work to do. That's my summary of what I see at the 3-4 levels.
That sounds about right.
And at the local level, at the national level, Republicans aren't apparently willing to move at all. This is a pre-election article, but it says that the Republicans are moving strongly along the southern border of Texas, and getting Republicans to run. How many actually? One, I don't know, but they are making movements to take over, if they can, the borderlands. So that's something to be aware of.
Yeah.
Can I suggest a topic for next time? And next Monday might not be it because I'll be traveling. I'll try to log on if you guys hold it, but I can't rely on myself. Immigration, but international migration. And I'm thinking now World Cup and all the migrant workers in Qatar, but all these other countries that have it. I think there's lessons for us to be learned. Given that nothing's happening at our national level, maybe we could take a look and just read up a little bit on what's happening in other countries when it comes to migration.
Okay.
That sound good?
That sounds interesting, yeah.
All right. Then it's a homework assignment for all of us to do a little bit more reading.
That's 2 weeks from now?
2 weeks, unless you force one next week, and I'll try to join, but it'll be mainly YouTube.
Okay.
You decide.
We'll decide between now and then. All right.
Sounds good.
Thank you,
All right.
everyone.
Have a good night.
You
Love
too.
to see you guys.
Bye-bye.
You need a tagline, all right? Next time.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.